Hello students, today's topic is private sector income and government sector income. Let's start with the first one, which is private sector income. The income of the private sector. Private sector includes households and businesses. Okay. The income of the private sector known as private disposable income. It measures the amount of income the private sector has available to spend. So first of all, you should know that the private sector includes households and businesses. Second thing, income of a private sector is known as private disposable income, and it measures the amount of income which the private sector has available to spend. Private disposable income comprises of all these components, where Y refers to gross domestic product, which is GDP. NFP denotes net factor payments from abroad. Net factor payments from abroad is factor payments from abroad, which can be written as FIFA minus FITA. Factor income from abroad minus factor income to abroad. This can also be said as NFIA, net factor income from abroad. Okay, so it is factor income from abroad minus factor income to abroad. TR is transfers received from the government. INT denotes interest payments on the government's debt. गवर्नमेंट ने अगर कोई लोन लिया है प्राइवेट सेक्टर से तो उस लोन के ऊपर अगर जो भी इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट दी है गवर्नमेंट ने, दैट इज इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट ऑन द गवर्नमेंट्स डेब्ट. And last one, T refers to the taxes. Private disposable income equals private sector income earned at home. Home means domestic country. Earned at home, which is GDP, and abroad, which is net factor payments from abroad. So basically, if I'll talk about these two components, it is the income of the private sector earned. This is the income earned at home, which is gross domestic product. Okay, and this is the income earned from abroad, which is net factor payments from abroad. Clear? Plus payments to the private sector from the government sector. तो गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर ने जो भी पेमेंट्स की हैं प्राइवेट सेक्टर को, उसमें क्या क्या आएगा? ट्रांसफर्स and interest on the government debt. So these two components comprises the payments made by the government sector to the private sector. These are the transfer payments, and this is the interest on the government debt, that if the government has taken any borrowings from the private sector, then the interest paid by the government sector to the private sector. So this INT denotes interest payments on the government's debt. And the last one is minus taxes paid to the government. Minus taxes paid to the government by the private sector. Because these taxes are the payments made by the private sector to the government sector. So we can say that this is an expenditure for the private sector, and that is the reason we are subtracting it. Okay, लॉजिक क्लियर? जो टैक्सेस है वो एक तरीके से पेमेंट है, एक एक्सपेंडिचर है किसका? प्राइवेट सेक्टर का. और हम कैलकुलेट कर रहे हैं प्राइवेट डिस्पोजेबल इनकम, मतलब इनकम ऑफ द प्राइवेट सेक्टर, एंड दैट इज द रीजन वी आर डिडक्टिंग दिस एक्सपेंडिचर. So we have covered up this first component, which is private sector income. Fine. एक बार रिकॉल कर लेते हैं जल्दी से. प्राइवेट डिस्पोजेबल इनकम, इनकम ऑफ द प्राइवेट सेक्टर. These two items denote the income of the private sector earned at home, which is GDP, and this is abroad, which is net factor payments from abroad. These two components denote the payment by the government sector to the private sector. Okay. transfer payments, and this is the interest on the government debt, and this is the taxes paid by the private sector to the government sector. So this is the expenditure of the private sector, and that is the reason we are subtracting it. Next, look at the second part of this video, which is government sector income. So the net government income can be written as in this form. See, I can also write it as in this form. It is easy to understand now because we are calculating net government income, means revenue minus expenditure. Taxes are the revenue for the government, right? These taxes are paid by the private sector to the government sector. So this is the revenue for the government, right? And this is the expenditure of the government, which is government sector to the private sector. So it's simple, revenue minus expense, net government income. Clear? So we have private disposable income and the other one is net government income. If I will add these two equations, let's consider it as first equation, this is as second equation. So if I will add these two equations, what I will get? First, this will be cancelled out. This will also be cancelled out. This will be cancelled out. So the final result will be Y plus net factor payments from abroad. Y is GDP, so I can write it as GDP plus net factor payments from abroad. And I think if you remember, this is gross national product. This is gross national product. Okay, so basically the sum of the private disposable income and the net government income is gross national product. Clear? Thank you.